We really are the best team in London and by quite some distance. Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. We're talking Arsenal 1, Chelsea 0, and there'll be a little bit of reaction to the League Cup final that also took place on Sunday afternoon. Hey, everybody, how are we doing? Welcome back along to the podcast. Hope you're all having a wonderful Monday so far. Little bit chilly, isn't it? I made the silly mistake yesterday of heading down to the Emirates in a really light jacket. I saw the sunshine. I got coaxed in. Last weekend was quite mild, and I thought that we were turning a bit of a corner in terms of the weather. So there was me in a very sort of light jumper and a really light jacket. And as soon as I got to the Emirates Stadium, I went, what on earth have I done? It is absolutely freezing. But we got through it in the end, and the Gunners took all 3 points. And it's a really big 3 points, I think, in the context of our season and in the context of, what we can still achieve. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to go on and win the Premier League. I haven't said that for a while, but finishing second is imperative to me anyway. Finishing second is really, really important because we need to show, and I said it on the preview show ahead of the Chelsea game, we need to show that we've got to this level of being runners up. And although we want more, of course, and we hoped for more at the start of the season, we've got to show that even in adversity, even with all the problems that we've experienced this season, that we're still capable of now making that as our kind of bottom line, that we don't fall any further. And yesterday's result was massive in that sense, not because the title's on and we should all get excited, and not because, it's something particularly significant whereby we should all be sort of jumping up and down and pretend that all the issues that we've had haven't happened. And, if in some cases we feel that there's blame to be had by some, I don't think we should forget about all of that and move on from that. But it was a big result in the sense of it puts us in a really commanding position now for second place. You look at how the table looks now. Okay, we're only 4 points ahead of Nottingham Forest, but with all due respect to them, they would be the last team that I'm worried about out of the three that are maybe in contention in terms of trying to peg us back. Chelsea, Manchester City, all in the mix as well. And obviously yesterday's victory over Chelsea means we're 9 points clear of them. And obviously Manchester City's result at the weekend, then us going on and getting 3 points, means we're now 10 points clear of them. So we're in a really good spot in terms of securing that second place. There's still work to be done, obviously. But we're in a place now where we can kind of come back after the international break, give everything one final push in the league, in the Champions League, and kind of see where we end up and build again over the course of the summer and get ready to go again. It very much feels like that at the minute around Arsenal's Premier League games. Like everything we're doing is a bit of damage limitation in terms of making sure that we stay in second place, and B, thinking about what we need and what we could do within the summer ahead of another season. And so our Premier League games for me right now, I've got a bit of a strange feeling around them. I've got to be honest. I don't think it helped yesterday that it was a 1:30 kickoff. It was a little bit flat inside Emirates Stadium. I thought up until we heard North London Forever, I thought people got pretty up for that, considering sort of where our season's at and all the rest of it and all the things we've been discussing over the last couple of months. And there were periods in the game where the atmosphere was pretty good, but I think that was because the game became quite feisty at various points, and I think that's what the crowd were feeding off of. And yeah, it was a comfortable win in the end. I mean, I know the 1-0 scoreline doesn't necessarily always paint that picture or tell that story, but I never felt at any point that we were troubled by this Chelsea side. And, when you think about how much money they've spent, it's crazy, isn't it, that there still seems to be such a big gap between the two teams. Moises Caicedo, funnily enough, in his post-match interview with Chelsea TV, said that they were better than us. I mean, I don't know what he was watching. I mean, he was playing in it, so if he doesn't know what really went down, then you got to start to ask questions. Is it someone trying to defend his team? Is it someone trying to defend their performance, or is there a little bit of delusion creeping in there? I don't know. Anyway, let's start with Mikel Arteta's team selection. Is always a good place to start. I did wonder, with Gabriel Martinelli being back and with him in line for a start, if we were going to see either him or Leandro Trossard play through the middle. I did wonder if that's something that we would go for. And obviously with Chelsea, they are a team that like to play on the front foot. They are a team that like to squeeze up as high as possible. You saw it yesterday. it looked to me on paper like they were playing with a back five with Reece James and Cucurella as wing backs, and then that trio of Colwill, Badiashile, and Fofana sort of playing as the three centre backs. But you saw quite often that Cucurella would sort of push on the left-hand side. You'd see Reece James inverting quite a bit and joining in with the midfield. And so Chelsea were front-footed. You can't accuse Chelsea of coming to the Emirates Stadium like a lot of other teams do and parking the bus. And that said to me that it was going to be the type of game where there would be space in behind if we could use it right, where there would be grass to run onto if we had the players that wanted to essentially run in behind. Then, that's why I wondered if maybe this was the time to perhaps give Martinelli a go in that centre forward role. We didn't do that. We went with Martinelli right, Trossard left to start with, and then we went with Mikel Merino through the middle. And look, my thoughts on the Mikel Merino thing in general are that it's not giving us enough in terms of our build-up play. It's not giving us what we get out of Havertz. It's not giving us what we get out of Jesus when they play at centre forward. Players that we often malign for being more effective in the build-up sometimes than what they are in front of goal. In Mikel Merino, you kind of got the opposite. Now, we know he's not a centre forward by trade, so any criticism of Mikel Merino is always put forward with that caveat, right? I know that he's doing a job for the team. I know he's playing out of position. And so when I analyze his performances, I'm not doing it from a place of, oh, he's rubbish, get him out of the team, or I blame him. I'm doing it from a place of, let's just say what we see and let's not pretend that it's working perfectly, because I think in the build-up, we get very little out of Mikel Merino. However, when chances come his way, he seems to be pretty good at taking them. He seems to have that finisher's, goal scorer's instinct, which I really, really like about him. And as much as I probably would have left him out in this game, and I think in my preview show, I think I did put maybe Trossard through the middle. I did feel like it was time now to kind of move on from that with Martinelli having returned to fitness. But credit to Mikel Arteta and his staff, because they've made that decision. And on the day, Mikel Merino has scored the winning goal and made the difference. So you can't really knock that call, can you? You can't criticize it. It's worked, and it's worked really, really well. Nwaneri on the bench again. I mean, we know that he's been suffering from a bit of fatigue recently. I feel a little bit for Ethan Nwaneri, because it was kind of like everybody lauding him and talking about how great he was. And then he had one off game at Old Trafford. And all of a sudden, the kind of mood around him has just changed a little bit. He's 17 years old, right? You're going to get these ups and downs. You're going to get these bumps in the road. And it's why I've always been really adamant that we shouldn't, as a fan base, put too much pressure on him. Every good thing that we get out of Ethan Nwaneri right now is a bonus. We all know that the talent's there. We're all quite confident that he's going to develop into the player that we all want and hope he'll be. And so I don't think we should obsess too much about the fact that it just feels like he's just dropped off a little bit. Obviously, he wasn't in the side again. And I think, with Martinelli coming back and with Trossard starting to play a bit better, in my opinion, hopefully Bukayo Saka's not far away. We keep hearing sort of positive updates with regards to the potential of him being available after the international break. Give him a few minutes against Fulham. Give him a few minutes against Everton. And let's get him back and ready to start for Real Madrid. That would be my goal. That would be my aim. But yeah, look, we're starting to get players back. And as I said the other day, when we get Bukayo Saka back, we're literally one player away from our best 11. And somebody sort of responded in the comments, forgive me, because I can't remember exactly who it was, and said, well, see, I told you we haven't got loads of players missing. Well, it's only because Martinelli's back. It's only because Ben White's back. It's only because others are back now that we are in a position where we can look at the team and say, okay, maybe we're one or two short of our best 11. But that hasn't been the case for the last few months. I thought our press was really aggressive yesterday, which I liked, particularly in the first half. And I thought Gabriel Martinelli being back in the team was a big part of that. I think for me, one of the great things about Martinelli is that even if at times, and he does make the wrong decision, he makes the wrong decisions in the final third, if he hasn't necessarily always got the kind of technical quality to pull off maybe what he's trying to do or what we need him to do, that directness, that energy, and that raw pace that he gives you is very, very valuable. And it's something that we've been missing. It's something that makes us quite predictable, because if you're working the ball out to the right-hand side to, let's say, Ethan Nwaneri, and again, this is no sort of this is no criticism of him necessarily, but it's the type of player he is. He's a left footer playing on the right-hand side. He always wants to drift inside. It becomes a little bit predictable. We try and operate a lot then in those half spaces. It all becomes a little bit predictable, right? When you've got Martinelli playing either on the right or the left, because he's quite comfortable doing this on either side, you just get a little bit more unpredictability in the sense of sometimes he'll go on the inside of you, sometimes he'll go on the outside of you, and he doesn't seem to mind. He seems to just work on instinct. Where is his kind of radar telling him that the space is? What's gone through his mind at that moment? That's what he'll try and execute. And I'm not saying that that's always the best thing, and I'm not saying that that's always what you want, but just having that balance between someone who's a little bit more measured in everything he does on the left in Leo Trossard, and then having someone who's a little bit more spontaneous on the other side in Martinelli, I think it gives us a really nice balance. And I thought he played a massive part in us really aggressively hunting Chelsea down and winning the ball high up the pitch, which we did a fair few times in the early stages of the game. It was amazing to me how often Robert Sanchez and the Chelsea defenders would literally just play the ball blind into the midfield with no thought and no regard for what was going on around them. We'd pinch it off them and we'd go make chances. We created a fair few chances. Declan Rice had a few, a couple, I think. Leo Trossard had one or two. Martinelli had that one where he sort of picked up the ball from Sanchez's pass, set himself cut inside onto his right foot, and saw a kind of disappointing shot easily saved. In my opinion, we should have had a penalty in the early stages because Cucurella clearly handled the ball. It's beyond me how A, the officials on the field haven't seen it, but B, how VAR has looked at that and decided that it's okay. I don't know. I give up trying to get into the mind and psyche of officials and trying to understand what is a free kick, what is a penalty, what is a corner, what is I don't know, anything these days. I'm at the point now where I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Let's just see what happens because I can't make sense of it at all. But look, the point is we had the chance and the chances to put ourselves out of sight in that first half, and we didn't do that. So that would kind of be my only criticism. As the half went on, I did feel like Chelsea were growing into it a little bit. And I'd argue that the last 8-10 minutes of the half, they were the better side. And they were the side that you felt were in the ascendancy. Now, obviously, we'd already broken the deadlock at that point, and we'll come back to talk about the goal specifically in just a second. I know I'm jumping around a bit, but they started to just get a little bit better. They started to just get to grips with, with the game, and they started to drop balls in behind our centre backs. And although they didn't have that natural centre forward, obviously Nicholas Jackson and Nodi Madueke were both out. Cole Palmer was out as well. So they were without players. Let's not pretend that they weren't. They just dropped a couple of balls in over the top, and there were a couple of nervy moments. William Saliba, a little bit nervy. Gabriel having to turn and run back towards his own goal after the ball was dropped over the top of his head. Obviously, Miles Lewis-Skelly likes to go roaming. That's what he's asked to do in that team. And so there were spaces, and they started, I think, to try and expose those. And then we had that moment where David Raya nearly produced a howler. It was a shot from Cucurella, and it was straight at David Raya. And you're expecting him, given the form he's been in this season, to just sort of bring it into his chest and clutch it really, really easily. And instead, the ball squirms out of his arms and rolls agonizingly wide of the post. I remember watching the ball just dribble across there and thinking, oh my God, this is going in. And listen, that would have been against the run of play. It would have, because other than that moment, I can't remember, not just in the first half, but in the entire game, David Raya really being called into any serious action. So that shows you that we've, and we've talked about it a lot this season, that even when we're missing something in the final third, generally speaking, we've got that defensive solidity that we can lean on. And that means that we don't have to go looking for 2, 3, 4 goals to win a football match. We can win games in the famous old way, 1-0 to the Arsenal. And that's exactly what we did. On the goal that we scored, of course, there's been a lot of talk recently, hasn't there, about the set piece stuff, and it maybe just drying up a little bit. Has it become a little bit predictable? Have people figured it out? Without Saka's delivery on that side, are we as effective when taking corners from our right? Obviously, it was Martin Odegaard that delivered it this time, and it was a very different corner routine, and I quite enjoyed this one. I think Nicholas Jover, I can imagine, will have been sitting on the training ground with his notepad, trying desperately to figure out new routines and new ways of trying to catch our opponents off guard, because it does feel like in the last couple of months, people have just started to figure it out. I think our last set piece goal prior to the one yesterday, and I might be wrong because I haven't looked this up. I'm just going by off the top of my head. I think the last one might have been back in December. So for a team that have been so kind of effective from those scenarios and those situations and have really kind of made set pieces count, generally speaking, over the last couple of years, to go such a long time without scoring one, it did start to feel a little bit strange. And we were sort of looking at it and going, have we lost our kind of mojo in this department? But then you get Mikel Merino making a really, really good, smart run across the near post. And what I love about this header is that it's a really clever one. It isn't a let me throw myself at it and see what I can get on the end of the ball. It's a really deliberate diversion of the ball towards the far post area. And, it might have been the intention. I don't know. You can't rule this out. It might have been the intention that the flick on was hopefully for someone to win the second ball at the far post. And, if you look at it, we did try and get bodies in and around that area as if we were anticipating that we were going to make the first contact at the near post. But obviously it loops over Sanchez, who I think is caught in two minds whether to come out and try and claim the cross or not. And then sort of starts to and realizes that it's, wide of his near post and he's not really going to get there. Maybe that step that he takes, maybe that bit of hesitation just opens the door for Merino. But the header loops in towards that area. And that's what you got to do in those situations, right? Nobody's saying that every time you attack a corner, you've got to deliberately pick out your spot. You've got to divert the ball into an area of danger. And if you divert it in towards the far post, it could be an own goal. It could come off one of your guys. It could come off the inside of the post. There's so many things that could happen. And it's about putting the ball into the right areas and at times playing the percentage game. And I feel that's what we were doing there. The second half was a little bit different. I thought it started a little bit flat, but I felt like the atmosphere was a bit flat. And that is a consequence, I think, also of the fact that, people go in and get a halftime beer and just take a little bit of time to come back out into their seats. And that does impact the atmosphere. You can't really get into the game when people are sort of making you get up every 2 seconds so that they can get to their seat, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think that's common. I think we see that quite a bit in football stadiums up and down the country these days, where just at the start of a half, the atmosphere is a little bit flat. But then it started to get a little bit feisty, didn't it? There were some challenges flying in. There were some yellow cards. There was a lot of arguing with the referee, Chris Kavanagh. There was a lot for the officials to try and keep a lid on. And I think they were in a place where they were trying not to let things get out of hand. Also didn't want to go around brandishing cards left, right, and center. But we got to the point where Chris Kavanagh had to start reaching for his pocket because it just got a little bit silly. I was surprised by Chelsea's antics in a lot of ways because, I don't know, maybe it's just my, preconception of them pre-game, but it feels like they've become a little bit of a softer touch. Like they're not the Chelsea with Terry and Drogba and Lampard and Carvalho and those guys that, would really kind of get into you. This is a nicer Chelsea side, if you like. And actually, do you know what I was really surprised by? How aggressive Pedro Neto was. Like, I never saw him as that type of player ever. Like, I just never had him down as that guy, but he was really aggressive, making challenges, getting in the referee's face. And he obviously ended up in the book as well. I don't know how it took 58 minutes, I beg your pardon, for Fofana to get booked. I thought he should have been booked 10, 15 minutes into the game, but obviously the referee allowing the situation to breathe and to develop. But you look at the highlights and, you look back at some of the key statistics around this game. And the truth is, guys, that Chelsea didn't lay a glove on us. And that is something that we should take encouragement from. Was it Arsenal's best performance? No, I don't think so. Were there periods in the game where we dropped off quite significantly? Yeah, I think there were. But this is, going to be the case. And this is to be expected, I believe, when you look at where our season is at and the kind of mood around everything at the moment. I mean, to put into context how the game went, okay, so Chelsea actually had more of the ball, 59% of the possession. And it's not often that you see that with an Arsenal side, but sometimes it's okay to let the opposition have more of the ball. I've talked about it before. I feel like at times we've been obsessed with dominance and control. And in our endless pursuit of that, we've sometimes taken away the spontaneity and creativity, and we've not really been as effective as an offensive side on the transitions. And this was a game where, having gone 1-0 up, we could almost say we trust ourselves defensively. You can have loads of the ball across your back line, especially, and let's see what you can do with it. And in this instance, Chelsea didn't really make anything of it. There was, so they won on the possession front, 59% versus our 41%. In terms of expected goals, a pretty low game in terms of XG all around for both sides. Our XG was 0.71 and Chelsea's was 0.36. We had 12 shots at goal. They had 8. But of their 8, they only forced David Raya into 2 stops. We managed in our 12 to force 4 out of Robert Sanchez. So that's 1 in 3. For them, it was 1 in 4, in which they worked the goalkeeper. We had 5 corners, which isn't a lot for Arsenal at home. They had 4 corners. It was kind of a non-event of a game in a lot of ways. I really do feel like that. And, is it to be expected given where we are in our season? Yeah, I guess so. I feel like Chelsea did push and Chelsea did try. Again, I acknowledge the fact that they were without some of their key attacking players, and that clearly played a part and made a difference. But I feel like Chelsea really gave it and really pushed and really desperately tried to, having gone a goal behind, find a way back into the game. And we just didn't let them. We just shut the door on them. And so, not the best Arsenal attacking performance by any stretch of the imagination. And unfortunately for us, we've seen a few of those this season. But in terms of defensively, I thought, again, we were back to our best and we were able to just keep them at arm's length. Remember in the cartoons, and I've used this analogy before, where you used to see like the bigger character sort of put his hand out and the little character's there on his hand and he's like trying to swing for him and he can't reach. That's what it kind of felt like watching this game yesterday. What I did sort of end up thinking last night, though, having sort of finished watching football all day, which is what I did. I mean, what a day this was. I got up in the morning, went down to the Emirates, watched Arsenal-Chelsea, got back for the Carabao Cup final. I think I missed the first 15 minutes. Watched the Carabao Cup final. Then shortly after that, I watched Atalanta versus Inter. And then I switched over to Atletico Madrid against Barcelona. And obviously, Atalanta-Inter was a 7:45 and Atletico-Barca was an 8 o'clock. So I got to watch the end, which was the most dramatic part of the Atletico-Barcelona game without doing the whole split screen thing. And it was just an incredible day of football. But what I came away thinking was, man, if only we didn't have these problems this season. If only we didn't have these issues. If only we were still within touching distance of this Liverpool side. Because as far as I can see it, guys, they're gassed out. They look like they're running out of gas. They look like they're really, really struggling. They look like they are having a bit of a wobble. And it's in the business end of the season, right? They got out of the Champions League in midweek and they've lost the Carabao Cup final, in which many people made them very strong favourites to win. Now, I don't think they should have ever been as strong favourites as they were, because I think Newcastle showed against us in the semi-final that they're a very good outfit. They've showed under Eddie Howe throughout his tenure that they're capable of putting together a game plan, and they do have the quality to execute it. Liverpool will bemoan the fact that they had a few players missing. So did Newcastle, man. They had no Gordon. They had no Botman at the back. And they still did a fantastic job. Alexander Isak again, showing he's a man for the big occasion and for the big moments. Incredible technical ability display to just sweep that shot home in such a high-pressured environment like that. Big Dan Burn up from the back. I mean, who scores a header from there? Incredible. And listen, obviously, we've developed a bit of a rivalry with Newcastle, haven't we, over recent years? And the whole Eddie Howe, Jason Tyndall versus Mikel Arteta thing has become a thing, right? But I'm chuffed for them. For those fans, man, to see them win a trophy for the first time in 70 years. For most of them, that'll be the first time. They turned Wembley black and white. They turned London upside down over the weekend, and in a nice way, in the sense of, I don't know if there been any troubles, but they were obviously enjoying themselves and making the most of the occasion, and rightly so. Yeah, it was just, it was nice to see them lift the trophy over Liverpool. And although they'll be the story. I think there does need to be questions asked of Liverpool now, who, yeah, they're going to win the Premier League title, but this season promised so much more for Arne Slot's men. And it feels like it's fading away a little bit. And in a weird way, I know winning the Premier League title is still going to be an amazing achievement, right? And they're going to love it and they're going to celebrate the shit out of it, because the last time they won it, it was COVID and they couldn't have fans in the ground and all the rest of it. I get that. But I do think what's happened in the last week, and it might not feel this way to Liverpool fans come the end of the season when they've had a bit of time to kind of heal those wounds, but it will have taken a little bit of a shine off their season. And again, it's not to take anything away from them. They're going to be deserved Premier League champions, but it sparks that kind of feeling of regret within us, doesn't it? That if we had kept people fit, and I know there's an element of bad luck there, but I think we've played our part in that a little bit as well with the lack of rotation at times. We've heard sort of lots of talk about workload, and I think we could have managed that a little bit better in the case of a couple of players in particular who we're now without. Saka and Havertz, for me, have been running to the ground for a good 2 seasons now. Like it felt like those injuries were inevitable at some point. So that's my frustration. But yeah, great to see Newcastle win it. And yeah, we move. International break now. It's going to be a tough one. We got a good couple of weeks now without a game. So yeah, we're going to try and bring you guys as much Arsenal-related content as we can. I guess we can kind of start our post-mortem of the Premier League campaign, at least. We don't know what the Champions League is going to look like and how that's going to go for us, but we can kind of start our post-mortem of the Premier League season. Over the course of the international break, we'll focus on a few players. We'll focus on a few interesting talking points. I've still got something up my sleeve from the pre-PSV press conference. Something that Mikel said that I found really interesting that we can analyze and dive into. Wanted to do it yesterday when I got down to the Emirates Stadium, but just didn't get the time due to my kind of work commitments. But we will bring you that over the course of this international break as well. Hoping to get Bukayo Saka back after it, which will be a massive positive and a massive boost. But just in conclusion on yesterday, a solid performance. At times we had Chelsea up against the ropes, but we still lacked that punch, I felt, a lot of the time. But that ability to keep teams at arm's length is massive, and it's going to serve us really well over the coming years, you feel. And hopefully in the Champions League as well. I'm not saying it's going to be that easy against Mbappe, Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo, Bellingham of Real Madrid. But, you take belief from the fact that we do seem to be able to turn up to places or even at home, just keep those clean sheets and focus on that. And if you can do that, you're always in a game. You're always in a game. So yeah, massive win for us in the sense of, I think it goes a long way in helping us to consolidate that position of second. It's not what we wanted at the start of the season, but it's the best we can aim for now. And so we've got to make sure that we at least get that. Don't fall any further. Don't take away from the season any more than you need to, and people might say, well, we should prioritize the Champions League now and rest players in the Premier League and whatever. Now, if you do that in the games in between ties against Real Madrid, I'm not going to complain hugely about it, but I don't personally feel like we can afford to let the standards drop. I think we've got to finish second. Maybe that bit of breathing space that we've got now allows us to rotate and change things up ahead of the games against Real Madrid without it being too detrimental and too damaging. And maybe that's why we should celebrate yesterday's victory, because it's given us that little bit of breathing space and the room to maneuver around that. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. But thank you so much for tuning in as well. Apologies that I'm not live today. I am heading down to central London this morning. Got quite a bit of work on today. So I got a couple of different shows that I'm doing, and then I'll be back in North London later tonight. And of course, we're going to bring you podcasts throughout the week, despite it being the international break. And we'll start breaking down some of those topics I mentioned, as well as covering any news stories that are forthcoming. Thank you all so much for joining me. Remember to leave a like on the video. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you're listening to us on audio, whether that be Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast, please do leave us a review. All of that stuff really does help. I will see you all on the next one. North London is red. We knew that. We've got an incredible record, haven't we, against the Big Six under Mikel Arteta. That's one thing that even his biggest critics can't take away from him. I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Goodbye.